Here's what's coming up on the world today. London's Met Police to investigate lockdown parties held at the Prime Minister's Downing Street residence. NATO allies on the ready for action against Russia if it invades Ukraine. Plus, 8 people killed, dozens more injured during a stampede at a football stadium in Cameroon. A warm welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. To begin in the UK, where the Metropolitan Police says it is investigating a number of events at Downing Street and Whitehall for potential breaches of COVID restrictions. The move, according to the Commissioner, Cressida Dick, follows information from the Cabinet Office Inquiry Team and her officers' assessment. And the investigation has been welcomed by Mr. Boris Johnson.
My questions are to you.
London's Metropolitan Police Commissioner Cressida Dick told a press conference today that police will investigate alleged lockdown breaches at the Prime Minister's Downing Street residence after receiving evidence from an internal government probe into a series of gatherings.
Firstly, of the information provided by the Cabinet Office Inquiry Team, and secondly, my officer's own assessment, I can confirm that the Met is now investigating a number of events that took place at Downing Street and Whitehall.
The British Prime Minister is fighting for his political survival after a stream of leaks revealed that his staff held parties during the toughest peacetime rules imposed in Britain. New allegations emerged late on Monday that he broke the COVID-19 rules he imposed by attending a surprise birthday party in Downing Street when social gatherings indoors were banned.
So I welcome the Met's decision to conduct its own investigation.
Mr. Johnson said he welcomed the investigation and it would help to draw a line under the issue.
To draw a line under matters.
Opposition Labour leader Keir Starmer said the revelations were yet more evidence that the Prime Minister believed the rules implemented then did not apply to him.
Yet more evidence that we've got a Prime Minister who believes that the rules that he made don't apply to him. And so we've got a Prime Minister and a government that spend their whole time mopping up sleaze and deceit.
Londoners mulled over the future of the Prime Minister. Some wondered whether the recent revelations of revelry, which also include boozy parties in Downing Street, suitcases of supermarket wine and a broken children's swing, would have an effect on Mr. Johnson and likened him to a non-stick surface substance, Teflon.
Well, to be honest, it's like you say, if you break the rules, you've got to go, ain't you? There's too many excuses of them coming from him. Do you know, everything's an excuse, and that apology the other day, that's like insulting all our intelligence, really, isn't it? Like, if he thinks we're all that dumb that we're going to believe what he said.
It's more of the same, isn't it? It's like, I don't expect any more from him, to be honest. I think everybody's expectations are totally at its lowest ebb at the moment. They probably always have been. Well, for me anyway, I've never expected any more from him. Totally disappointed.
In the meantime, Labour is calling for all evidence relating to alleged parties to be given to the police and for this to be published. Analysts say if the Metropolitan Police find evidence of wrongdoing at Downing Street, the politics of that will be inevitably more significant than the financial impact of any fixed penalty tickets they dish out.
We'll be back to Europe in a bit, but the African Cup of Nations quarter-final match due to hold on Sunday at the Olembe Stadium in Yaoundé, Cameroon has been moved following the tragedy at the Paul Biya Stadium where 8 people died in a stampede. 2 of those killed were children aged 6 and 14, and dozens of people were injured. The government has called for investigation into the matter.
At least 8 fans died and 38 people were injured in the stampede at the Yaoundé Olembe Stadium in Cameroon on Monday, before the host nation's round of 16 game in the Africa Cup of Nations against Comoros Islands. Images shared on social media showed screaming fans being crushed at an entrance gate. The injured were brought to a district hospital near the stadium where distressed family members were looking for their relatives.
All my family went to the stadium. Afterwards, I get a call to come to the hospital. When I arrive, I find my big sister screaming and my little brother is lying down here.
A pregnant woman is one of those who died. There's also a child. We can't find the mother, but the child is here.
President Paul Biya has ordered an investigation to shed light on the tragic incident. The Confederation of African Football, which organizes the tournament, has also launched its own investigation. Following a low turnout in their first-round games at brand-new stadia built for the continent's premier men's soccer tournament, Cameroon authorities have thrown open stadium gates, organized mass transport, and given out free tickets to lure fans. The country, which is hosting Africa's greatest sporting event for the first time in half a century, has been beset by organizational problems in its staging of the finals, having originally been supposed to first host in 2019, only for late preparations to cause a delay.
Tragedy at the AFCON. Let's switch gears now to the situation in Ukraine as U.S. President Joe Biden, following his talks with NATO leaders on Monday night, says there is a total unanimity with them over Russia's troop buildup on its border with Ukraine. During the secure crisis talks, Western powers agreed to unprecedented sanctions against Russia if it were to invade Ukraine.
The U.S. president, pushing for transatlantic unity, held an 80-minute secure video call with a number of European leaders on Monday from the White House Situation Room to discuss the Ukraine crisis. He told journalists later that he had a very good meeting.
I had a very good meeting, total unanimity with all the European leaders. We'll talk about it later. Thank you.
On Monday, NATO said it was putting forces on standby and reinforcing Eastern Europe with more ships and fighter jets in what Russia denounced as Western hysteria in response to its buildup of troops on the Ukrainian border. The U.S. Pentagon later said 8,500 troops have been put on high alert, ready to deploy to Europe, potentially at very short notice, should the NATO alliance activate a rapid response force.
Secretary Austin has placed a range of units in the United States on a heightened preparedness to deploy, which increases our readiness to provide forces if NATO should activate the NRF, or if other situations develop.
The Kremlin says it's watching with great concern Washington's actions and statements around Ukraine, which are escalating tensions.
What we're doing to track down.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the UK will not hesitate to toughen sanctions on Russia.
We have a hard-hitting package of sanctions ready to go. What I think would be fair to say is we want to see our European friends ready to deploy that package as soon as there should be any incursion at all by Russia into Ukraine.
The UK's foreign minister says she'll be visiting Ukraine next week, reiterating a warning to Russia that any incursion into Ukrainian territory would come at severe economic cost.
I hosted Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba in London in December. I speak to him regularly and I'll be visiting Ukraine next week. A further military incursion by Russia into Ukraine would be a massive strategic mistake and come with a severe cost on Russia's economy, including coordinated sanctions.
Other NATO members like Denmark, Spain, France and the Netherlands are already planning to send fighter jets and warships to Eastern Europe to bolster defenses in the region. The Kremlin has said it sees NATO as a security threat and is demanding legal guarantees that the alliance will not expand further east, including neighboring Ukraine. The United States, however, insists the issue at stake is Russian aggression.
The VOA's senior diplomatic correspondent joins me now. Cindy, great to see you. So leaders have had their meeting yesterday virtually, and according to U.S. President, they unanimously agreed on Ukraine. So there will be sanctions, there will be troops ready for deployment, and the people on the other side of this, Ukrainians, are scared how this will all turn out. What do Americans think about another military action somewhere else in the world involving U.S. troops?
Right. Well, just to clarify, what's happening right now is that the U.S. is putting troops who are based in the U.S. on alert so that if NATO were to call for them, or as the defense spokesperson said, other events would happen, that they would be ready quickly to go. So the U.S. is not deploying troops. And if these troops were to go, they would not go to Ukraine, but they would go to support and defend NATO positions, NATO deployments in Eastern Europe. And as to your question, I don't think there is any appetite for another war and getting U.S. troops involved, especially not in a war with Russia and the U.S. both being nuclear powers. But there is a sense that Russia has amassed these troops, more than 100,000 troops on its borders with Ukraine, several different borders, and now also in Belarus, which is not that far from the Ukraine capital, Kyiv. So there is a sense, I think, among President Biden and his top officials, a bit of a change in tone. Diplomatic efforts are still going on, but there is a sense that the U.S. is now also boosting its defensive capabilities, flexing a little muscle, at least in the Eastern Europe among its NATO allies in Eastern Europe, to show Russia, yes, we are taking this very seriously, this threat of another invasion.
And interestingly, Russia does see U.S. actions in Ukraine and around Ukraine as a threat as well. The pullout of the evacuation of diplomats from the embassies, also the armaments going on that part of the world. But it was just a few months ago, wasn't it, Cindy? The troops were withdrawn from Afghanistan after 20 years. And not just U.S. troops, but NATO and UK troops were also pulled out from Afghanistan. And it's one of the longest missions the U.S. has ever had outside. You think America is ready for another war?
No, I don't think so at all. And I think what the State Department is saying, and some analysts whom I've just been speaking with are also saying, is that perhaps the State Department has learned from what happened in Afghanistan. We all saw that it was a chaotic withdrawal and that the military left, and then there were still American diplomats and their families left in Afghanistan. So I think the U.S. here is just trying to be, as they say, prudent and take measures, precautions, just in case there is a major Russian invasion of Ukraine, by asking the families of diplomats, ordering them actually to leave and having a voluntary departure for local hires. And the U.S. is also asking Americans living in Ukraine, or recommending that they leave and saying that they should avail themselves of commercial options. So I think that you're right to bring up this Afghanistan departure, which we all saw, which certainly could have been better organized and planned. And I think the U.S. is just trying to be cautious in this case and to get family members and others out of harm's way in case the worst should happen.
Now, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson yesterday said that intelligence on Ukraine is gloomy. So I'm wondering what sort of intelligence the U.S. is receiving, the U.S. President is receiving about the situation on the ground in Ukraine.
Right. Well, U.S. officials have been asked about this British intelligence, which actually named names of Ukrainian politicians that it says the Kremlin is planning to install in Kyiv, put its own people who are Moscow friendly in power. And it's very unusual that intelligence agencies would come out with this information. But I think part of it may be a strategy to indicate to Russian President Putin, look, we see what's happening here. We know what's going on. This is right out in the open. You know, you're not going to be able to do this secretly. And ask about that. U.S. officials said, yes, this is the very thing that we've been warning about. And they had also warned about the so-called false flag operations, where it said that Russia had sent in agents into Ukraine, trained in using explosives to attack their own proxy forces who have been fighting now since 2014 in eastern Ukraine, to make it look like, oh, they had been attacked by Ukrainians, and to deliver a pretext for a Russian invasion. So it is unusual, but we're getting some of this intelligence, I think, to probably, hopefully, that the intention is to stave off Russia from actually carrying out these actions.
Oh, Cindy, always enjoy talking to you. Thank you for joining me on the program.
Great pleasure.
We still have more stories coming up after the break on The World Today Plus. So we all know Paris is located in France, right? It's the capital. But Paris is also a town in Russia. We'll tell you all about it when we return. Welcome back to The World Today. Crazy weather across Europe and parts of the United States. Drone footage captured long queues of stranded trucks and cars as traffic jams built up in Turkey's largest city, Istanbul, today. There it is. Heavy snowfall clogging roads and stranding thousands of people across the city of 16 million people, delaying buses and ferries and prompting a ban on driving private vehicles. Governor Ali Yerlikaya took the rare step of banning private cars until 10 p.m. today, while public workers were given leave through Wednesday to keep commutes to a minimum. Buses have also been suspended until Wednesday, and vehicles arriving from west of the city have been barred. Passage across the Bosphorus Strait reopened today, while people were evacuated from stranded vehicles, according to the transport minister. Well, the situation in Greece is quite similar. Officials have had to shut down non-essential services and called for a two-day public holiday as the country battles a rare storm that left scores of people trapped in their vehicles. Rescue crews, including the Army and Fire Brigade, are working to evacuate people who are stranded in their cars on an Athens motorway and major thoroughfares because of the snowstorm. Much earlier, more than 3,500 people were evacuated, some abandoning their cars on foot, while around 1,800 cars remain stuck on the motorway, which is the capital's main ring road. People evacuated from motorways were sheltered at the Athens Airport Hotel overnight. Soldiers and firefighters are up and about with shovels, assisted by bulldozers to try and dig out vehicles. The Greek Prime Minister's office says the motorway is to pay compensation for each vehicle that is stranded. We're back in Africa. Following up on the coup in Burkina Faso, a new leader has been announced. 41-year-old Paul Henry Sandao Damibia, a lieutenant colonel who studied in France, has been at the forefront of the country's fight against Islamist militants. He assumes the new role as leader a day after the military announced they had taken over government.
Communiqué numéro 1.
After much denial and in the face of uncertainty, Burkina Faso's army on Monday evening confirmed they had removed President Roch Kabore from office, citing his inability to unite the nation. That announcement on state television also said the Roch Kabore's government had been dissolved, the constitution suspended, and the West African country's borders closed. It was made in the name of a previously unheard-of entity, the Patriotic Movement for Safeguard and Restoration, and was said to have been signed by Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandago Damiba.
People of Burkina Faso, given the continued degradation of the security situation that is threatening the very foundation of our nation, the manifest incapacity of the government of Roch Kabore to unify Burkinabe to effectively tackle the situation, and given the exasperation of the different sections of the nation, the Patriotic Movement for Safeguard and Restoration has decided to take its responsibilities before history, the national and international community. This movement, which includes all sections of the army and security, has decided to end the post of President Kabore this January 24th, 2022.
As this announcement filled the air, celebrations erupted in the capital, Ouagadougou. As the sun set on Ouagadougou's place de la Nation, Resident Mahamadou Drago claimed that most people support the military and said we're relieved that Kabore was no longer president.
Today, we have a feeling of joy. We are so relieved because President Roch Kabore is no longer president of Burkina Faso. The power is with the military. We are happy. Most of the people support the military. We are really encouraged. We are mobilized to support the military in peace.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the African Union and West African Bloc ECOWAS and the EU have all condemned the move by the military and urged it to ensure Kabora's safety.
The Secretary General strongly condemns any attempted takeover of government by the force of arms. He calls on the coup leaders to lay down their arms and to ensure the protection of the physical integrity of the president and of the institutions of Burkina Faso. The Secretary General calls on all actors to exercise restraint and opt for dialogue.
In the meantime, Kabora's whereabouts are unknown, with conflicting accounts of his situation. He has been detained by the military, with the party saying that he had survived an assassination attempt. Landlocked Burkina Faso, one of West Africa's poorest, despite being a gold producer, has experienced numerous coups since independence from France in 1960.
And in Libya, UN political chief Rosemary DiCarlo says the country is at a delicate and fragile stage in its road to unity and stability. Addressing the Security Council, DiCarlo told members that the growing division among political actors and disputes over key aspects of the electoral process ultimately resulted in the postponement of the December 24th elections, despite the advanced stage of technical preparations by the High National Commission for Elections.
Clearly, Libyan stakeholders hold different views regarding the path that can take the country to free, fair, inclusive, and credible national elections and a peaceful transition. Discussion in the House of Representatives and among political actors is also increasingly focusing on the status of the government of national unity. Special Advisor Williams has reiterated to Libyan interlocutors that the focus of the political process should remain on the holding of parliamentary and presidential elections to be held in the shortest possible time frame.
Given Libya's accountability deficit and the wider challenges created by a decade of conflict, Libya's civil society has had to fill many vacuums. This comes at a high cost. The systematic crackdown on civil society by all parties in Libya, including the current government of national unity, has seen civil society organizations, and especially those working on human rights and peace building, harassed and prevented from carrying out their work. Members of civil society have been threatened, disappeared, tortured, and killed in retaliation for their work or public presence. The Council, as well as member states who have been supporting Libyan parties, must demand protection of Libyan civil society.
A life in Paris, no, not in France, but a village in the Russian southern Ural is strikingly different from the vibrant French capital it was named after, with most of the village's 1,600 to 1,700 residents being elderly. Its streets are a quiet place where mothers walk with baby carriages and occasional cows pass by. The similarities, however, don't just end with naming, as Ural's Paris also has its own Eiffel Tower, a telecommunication tower built in 2005 and shaped like a mini version of a famed French elder brother. The tower, just as its original counterpart, attracts tourists to the site, but on a much smaller scale, and the locals treasure it. A Russian Paris, founded in 1842, received its name after the Battle of Paris, where the local residents took part. Paris is not the only village in the region bearing the name of a major Western city. A curious tourist can find a local Leipzig, Berlin, and others in just a few hours' drive. The village received their names in the 17th to 18th centuries to honor the local Cossacks who fought in wars for Russia in the European conflicts at the time. Despite its glory in the past, the present of the Paris villages does not look bright, as most young people tend to leave for cities looking for more opportunities, and the population of Paris in Russia declines. That's the world today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.